Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Pointy Not Sharp. Today we're taking a look at one of my favourite bayonets in my collection. Now, Ian McCollum from Forgotten Weapons did a segment a couple of years ago called Adventures in Surplus, where he's looking at some of the surplus rifles he bought from a auction. And I thought that would be a very fitting segment for this particular bayonet just here. So this isn't an actual model of bayonet as much as it is parts and pieces cobbled together from several different contracts used in Indonesian service, and it just tells a story of what was happening in Indonesia, who they were purchasing from, and it's just very, very interesting. It's exactly, in my opinion, what Adventures in Surplus represents. So I was over in Bali about a month ago. I picked up a bunch of bayonets and I got this one for $11 US, which is absolutely nothing. And what I've got is I've got a US M7, one of the Colt ones with the markings on the blade, with a refurbished grip with really nice woodwork actually. And then I've got a FN M7 scabbard, which really uncommon to track down. Just the scabbard alone is probably worth a lot more than I paid. So what I've actually got here is, as I said, a combination of a bunch of different contracts and refurbishments that were done in Indonesian service. So throughout the 1970s and 80s, Indonesia were looking to replace their version of the BM-59, which they called the SP-1. They made about 60,000, or whatever it was, I forget, and they used them in a couple of skirmishes, and they performed terribly in the jungle. They weren't very reliable. They were very heavy, very hard recoiling for little Indonesian soldiers. So they started looking for rifles in 5.56, and they purchased a few, they trialled a few, and eventually they decided to produce their own version of the FN-FNC as the SS1. But they didn't start production of that until 1991. So leading up to that, they had a whole bunch of rifles that they purchased from different places, including M16s from Colt and FN-FNCs direct from Belgium. And that's what we have here. We have a mating of the two together. We have one of the FNC scabbards and one of the M16 bayonets provided by Colt. Now, in Indonesia, things get used very, very hard, and they get used in the tropics where they're exposed to a lot of corrosion and metal parts wear fast. And that is exactly what we have here. We have a blade that's been sharpened a million times, it's been corroded a million times, and just been worn down through use and wear in the Southeast Pacific. And we've also got one with replaced wooden grips. Now, it's quite common in Indonesia to come across M7s with replaced grips and other similar bayonets. And they always seem to be done in wood, and they always seem to have this style of pattern. And the woodwork is actually really, really good. I'm quite impressed with it. It's very well shaped and molded. It's got the 6 grooves, and that's generally what you see, although you do see some with just like a wavy pattern in them, which are really nice. And they're always really nicely finished with sort of a glossy, polished look to them. So it's very, very typical of Indonesia. This one here is in pretty poor condition, in that the pommel, only one of the latches works. The other one probably needs a lube and a hammer. And it's been painted black. Now, they've also done a little bit of grinding back here, and I assume that's when they've removed the latch plate to fit this new handle. It looks like we've got a seam running down the center here, but that could just as easily be a split because there's not really anything on the other side. And I suspect it was likely made in one piece, slotted over, and then that was put back on. And they've done a bit of machining back here at some point as well. Looks like they've staked it, done some grinding, and they've also painted the metallic parts black at some point. So black pommel, black crossguard, and I can't tell if it's like a heavy dark blue or parkerization or black paint, but there was something on the blade that's starting to wear off as well. So I'm happy with the bayonet. I love the grip, and then I get the really cool scabbard with it as well. So the FN-FNC scabbards have the FN logo printed on the front, and if you're familiar with Indonesian S1 bayonets that they would make with their version of the FNC, their scabbards are pretty much identical to this, except instead of FN, they have Pindad on the front. And again, you can just see the amount of wear and abuse that this scabbard has suffered throughout its life. I mean, the plastic body has held up remarkably well. The leg strap is still intact, if original, probably not. The metal parts have been painted black, and I can't tell if that's original, like Parkerized actually. But the frog has absolutely suffered. Hilt straps are coming apart. It feels like it's rotted and been wet and dried. I don't know if these originally came with belt loops or if this one's been sewn shut, because it doesn't appear to have been. But a lot of Indonesian frogs are heavily, I won't say modified, but repaired. And that's another classic modification you will see in Indonesian service. So this is a bayonet combination that, from a collector's perspective, isn't a specific model, but it just tells the story of bayonet use in Indonesia throughout the 70s and 80s. And for the low price of $11 US, it's definitely jumped to one of my favorites in my collection, and I'm not going to part with it anytime soon.